Hello, everyone, and welcome to this amazing little series. It's called RxJS Patterns in React, although we would very much like to call it RxJS Patterns in RxJS. That would be kind of fun.
That's what the meeting invite says.
Yes, it's very true. My name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet, and I am joined here by my co-host, Chris. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, everyone.
And we're talking to Ben today. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Lesh. Hi, Ben.
Hi. You know what I noticed is we're doing this in React, and like React is like way over there, like at least on my screen, and then like there's like a giant Angular, like high contrast Angular logo.
That's true. And then Vue and JavaScript, and
also there's a whale's
Docker.
A whale's butt right next to me, which is fantastic.
That's very true. I mean, you could draw the other half of the whale's butt, but we don't have time for that. We got to get going. So anyways, well, this got started because we're actually creating this really amazing website called starter.dev, released or to be released, depending on when you watch this video, to show different ways to architect and use applications with different technologies. And of course, RxJS and React is a very important one. Right, Ben?
So important.
Yeah. But anyways, Chris has all the fun questions. So Chris, I'll let you take it away.
Wait. I got this. Hold on. Oh, that's the wrong way. Hold
on. My God, I knew you were going to do it. I knew you were going to do it.
So I got this.
Oh my gosh, it's literally perfect.
Yeah,
it's like really close here. We just got to get it back a little bit, and then bam.
No, it's really good. It's really good.
Huh?
All right.
That's a great way to jumpstart the discussion.
Yes.
So like as Tracy mentioned, we are working on this showcase for and starter kit for React with RxJS. And we did come up with some solution for like using RxJS via hooks and using useEffects and useState to manage the like changing state and propagating that to a component. But this was very local approach, I guess. And I was wondering how we could integrate that maybe more to a global state and use RxJS to more manage the whole flow of effects happening. Which
sure. All right. So yeah, we can totally do it. Do you want to show what you've got and we can look at it?
I'm not sure. I guess it will be public at some point, so I guess we can.
Oh yeah, we can share it.
Share screen.
You're gonna get the secrets, Ben.
Ooh.
I just probably need to hide bookmarks. And I think we are in this repo still.
Okay. Should I share your screen now?
Yes, I guess. It's good now.
Perfect. There we go.
So we've got this create React app with RxJS, and I think I will open it the VS Code editor so it's easier to navigate.
VS Code editor in GitHub is so cool. I really like it.
Yeah, it's at least for viewing, it's nice. You cannot run stuff, but it's just web browser, so what to expect. And then we have I'm not the one who did it initially, so I'm not completely.
I want to see what's in the hooks. I bet it's
it's hooks, and we've got so we basically fetch top repositories from the GitHub API, and this is just one example. So we just fetch.
Do you want to make the text just a little bit bigger?
Yeah, just a little bit. This
Can
is.
You? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so we basically create a custom hook for like useStop repos, within which we like create a state and then have an effect that will update, fetch and update the data as it comes. And
maybe just a teensy bit bigger.
Okay, no worries.
There we go.
All right, so cool. Yeah. So this is, I mean, this is kind of the common way that I think that people go about building RxJS, like doing stuff with RxJS in React. I think that if I was gonna critique this at all, I don't think that the RxJS code in here is bad, right? But what I would do personally, what I usually end up doing is making smaller, more composable hooks to do things, right? So one of the things that you see in here is you've got this like use effect that is subscribing to an observable internally, right?
Yes.
So like I tend to just roll like a really small, and like I don't even pull in repositories for this because it's so small to do this. But like if you think about RxJS and what it's about having all these little small composable pieces that you can put together to build stuff. And I think that's why people get so excited. They like use the bejesus out of operators and they like, oh, this is so great. And they have all these tiny pieces, they put things together. So hooks realistically are the same idea. The difference between hooks and RxJS operators is primarily that hooks involve a render cycle in React to communicate between them, right? Where like RxJS is very explicit and it's saying I am emitting values from this, and this next step gets a value. It doesn't care where it comes from, and it does the next thing, and it emits a value. And then there's another step that gets a value, and so on and so forth. So like RxJS is very explicit in how you chain things, where like React hooks are more of an implicit chaining, right? Where it's just it's chained by virtue of the fact that all of the hooks are called inside of the function, which is just like the render call, right? So what I end up putting together usually is like a use subscription thing. So I would do like, do like a function, and you put a use effect in there. And like that function, I generally just have it take an observable straight, right? And if that observable changes, then you have the effect tear down and start back up. And this is something that I think some people trip over because they think, oh, I can create a new observable every single render, and you don't want to do that. You probably want to memoize it or create it externally or something like that. But
okay. So we could basically like use Mimo for this observable to like store it.
Let me drive really quick. I'm going to put up a stack blitz or something. Do you mind if I take over?
Yeah, sure.
I also added you to the repo, Ben, if you want to like just pull it up too. That's
all
okay.
Right. Let's see. I'm going to do.
Let me drive. That's a very Jay thing to say. Because, okay, so pairing with you, Ben, you always let me drive, but then pairing with Jay, Jay's like, give me access. Let me just show you what to do.
Let's see, I want to share just a window so I don't have to like share the whole my ultra wide monitor. All right.
Yeah, I have the same problem.
All right. So here we go. So
okay, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, I scaffolded
much bigger though.
Is awesome, first of all.
Needs to be much bigger.
Oh,
yes.
Much bigger. Yes. Good.
Bigger, a little bit
bigger than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more. Yeah, that is good.
Yeah.
All right. So I gotta go find the actual app in this thing. So
I love how you're like repping Vite.
Yeah, Vite's amazing. You call it Vite? I always call it Vite.
Or is it Vite?
No, it's Vite from French.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to be super American and keep calling it Vite.
Okay.
All right. Anyways.
So Texan of you. Just kidding.
Yeah. All right. So, I need to import. See, I can't. So hold on. I got to scale down a little bit so I can actually see where do I import stuff? I just do it in the package JSON. Oh no, I do it down here now. Cool. So we're not using yarn right now. npm install. Yes. All right, cool. And then what? I have to start the thing again. Dev. So cool. All right. So back to this. Now
make it big again.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Now, let's just say I'm going to import an interval or something from RxJS, so I have something to work with. And there's two places that people end up creating their observables. One is out here. Like if you can create it out here, do create it out here. Observables are just functions. You wouldn't want to recreate a function inside of your render of your component over and over and over again if you didn't have to. So if you can create it out here, create it out here. So this is, we'll call this source one. And the other place that people tend to create things is inside of here. And maybe this is because you've got, you know, some input from something else or whatever. We'll add that in there. But like, this is the other place people tend to create an observable. And the hook that I usually make to manage these things, I'm going to call it useSubscription, right? And useSubscription is going to take an observable, which I'll call source, then of God knows what. Actually, I'm literally going to call it like source of any because the what it is doesn't really matter. I could do unknown for people who are really sticklers. But inside of here, I have to say, all right, well, I'm going to use effect. And it's going to say, if source changes, then as long as we have a source, I want to get a subscription to it, right? I'm going to have to put something in here still. And when everything is torn down from this, I want to remove the subscription. So this thing is going to be my primary fixture for doing anything related to subscribing to observables. Now, the next thing I usually do is be like, all right, so this needs some sort of observer, or even a function. I could get fancy. I'm just going to say an observer in here, and this is going to be a partial observer, which I'm going to pull in of any for now. We'll fix that in a second. So this observer is partial, and you can just pass it right in here. And this is where this gets tricky, is if I go and I do this, then if someone passes in a straight like object there, this is going to keep tearing down and resubscribing over and over again. So not super great. You're going to need to memoize this as well. Or even if you do callbacks, you put the callbacks in here, you're going to have to memoize that. So you've got choices. And this is one of the crappy things about hooks is I can choose not to add observer in here and just like put in my ESLint rule, like override if I want. And if you think about that, the precedent for that is this right here. This doesn't like stuff underneath the hood doesn't act differently because you're passing a new function reference into use effect over and over and over again, right? Like that's not a thing. So you can opt into doing that. In this case, I might just for ergonomics reasons. If I trip over it later, then I change it. But I would most likely not pass this in here, just so that way when I use it, I'm passing an object literal in here, and I can even call this something else like handlers or something like that. We don't really need to know that it's an observer. So that way people aren't like, oh, I need to pass in. I might even change this so people don't examine the type and be like, oh, I can shove a subject in there, and if it changes, then I know that that's not a thing. But like just somewhere to register handlers, or I might even do handlers like next, error, and so on and so forth to make life easier. I'm just doing this right now to be lazy. You know what? I will do the handlers thing. I'm sorry. Let me change this around. So let's just call this our on next function. Next handler. Value. Boy. All right. we need to handle errors. I'll get to that in a minute. But so now I've got this useSubscription. So inside of here, if I want to do something with this, I can be like, hey, we got this count here. I'm going to change all of this around. This is very wordy. And just be like, okay, here's my count. Oh, I can't see it because we're so zoomed in. There we go. So there, now it's not counting, right? But I'm going to say useSubscription. Pass in, we'll do my external source first, this source 1. And then this is going to give us a number. And with that, I'm going to set count, whatever the number is. So we should sit, yeah, so we got it going. A little slow, make it a little faster because I don't like how slow that is. So here we go. So it's ticking along. And that's great and all. But what happens with this source? Like every single time it renders, if I were to put this source in here now, this is where some people trip up because most people end up creating things in here.
It would recreate it over and over again.
Yeah, it's freaking out on us. That's not great. It's getting recreated over and over again because this is new. And then, yeah. So like the thing that people need to do here is usually do a use memo. In this case, it's got no other inputs, but there you have it. So this is generally the pattern I go with. A lot of people try to roll this use state in with this and make some generic thing that also does the use state and stuff. That's fine. But what I find is quite often you might not want to update state from whatever your subscription's outputting. Maybe you want to do some other side effect that has nothing to do with your component, right? If you roll the use state into like a useObservable type solution, then, and that's the only solution you have to subscribe to RxJS, then you're updating the state that you're not even using for no reason. And it's a little bit weird. You can still do that. You can be like, function useObservable and, take some source and have it actually return like, T over and over again and still do like key value, set value, use state. You probably want to have some initial state that you put in there because sources can be totally asynchronous, right? And then in here, you'd still do your useSubscription and you put your source in, set value. Right? Like you can still use this to build this, right? But now you've got two choices in how you want to consume these things. So now I could, in theory, replace this and this. Let's move this closer to its usage. Always try to move things closer to its usage. I could replace these two things with count equals useObservable. Let's see, what do we have? Source 2. I don't even need that. And
initial state.
Like that, we need to have an initial value. So there. So like now we've got like two different primitives I can use to deal with observables. Now, the one thing I said I was going to come back to is what happens if we have a source in here that errors. Like let's just say that this thing here is going to count, and then we just type and do a tap or something. And in my tap, I can say, all right, n equals 2, then throw new error, boom, right? So when this counts up to 2, we're going to have a problem. So we already had the problem, and you see we get no feedback. And that means that we need to do something. We need to do something because this is getting a little weird because usually this manages its own subscription, but it's not going to tear down this effect because of that, right? Like there's no way, like if we want to have things retry we're still going to have to compose that here, not like inside of this. Don't even, or inside of this. Don't even attempt that. Like people try to do that. And the reason you can't do that is because this use effects teardown is in the use effect itself is disconnected from this source. And the only way you can try to force it to be controlled is to have some sort of weird like numeric counter or something that you're dealing with that tells the use effect to tear down. It's a terrible convoluted pattern. Don't attempt to do retries in here. Always just compose it into your observable, in my opinion. But we still need a way to handle that error so we can report it to the user. And what I do with that is you just have like some optional error handler error there. And if you provide it, here's the thing. If I go and I look at the you can't really see this, I don't think actually. But if you go and you look in the console, there'll be an uncaught error in the console because RxJS says, oh, you have an error, you didn't handle it, so I'm going to throw it asynchronously on its own call stack and report that to the console. But if you give RxJS an error handler by simply supplying it here, it will use whatever error handler you give it. So it's still not doing that. It's still reporting the console because we gave it nothing. But as soon as we go in here now and give it something, I can go in here and say like, okay, if you get an error and I don't know, alert or message, all right? We've got an alert here. That's a good pattern. Everyone should do that. So now we get our boom up here. Can you see that? Does that show up in the share?
Yes.
Great. So now we got our boom. It says our web container says boom. Great. And we blocked the thread because we're using alert because we're weird. But now you've got an error handler in here and you can use it to do other things like, well, we wouldn't do this in our useSubscription. See, this is where you get into other weird fun things. And so now we've got this useObservable. In here, you would probably want to add an error handler as well, an optional error handler. Because you're probably going to want to have this be different for each. Get rid of that alert. You probably want to have this be different for each observable. Like you're not going to handle every error exactly the same way, most likely, but maybe you will. I don't know. I don't know what your app is like. But you would go down in here and you'd be like, all right, so if there's an error in my app, so I've got our use memo, useObservable. I want to, have some error message, set error message equals use state. And we'll just say this becomes set error message, right? So if we're using observable and we have a problem, now you might want to come back into this and make these named arguments or something. I don't like when you get more than one or two arguments for a function, like as far as readability goes. But now we have this set error message and I can go back here and be like, okay, what's the error message? This is a great app, by the way. Every app should look exactly like this. But yeah, so in theory, when it runs, let's make sure I'm not doing anything. So it says hi, it should boom. What happened? Let's look at the console. Is it still? I thought error objects are not valid as a React child. Oh, it doesn't like the error object. That's right.
We need to error message dot message.
Error message dot message. Right. So maybe let's just get the message out of it here. There we go. So now we got our message. So this is the general pattern I would use as far as dealing with RxJS in this. Like complete, you see me, I'm not really looking at complete for those of you that are watching this that are familiar with complete. I'm not really dealing with that here. It's pretty rare that I want to know that something's complete. If I do, it's because, I don't know, maybe you've got some sort of streaming, like I'm streaming a bunch of updates and when this is closed or done, I want to tell the user or something. great. You add another handler in here, do your thing. So, or maybe you even want some default error handling in here, in which case, just like whatever, default error handler, and then you create some other function that handles things in some default way. But yeah, like this is the overall thing I would do as far as hooks and RxJS goes.
And what do you think about like instead, maybe not even instead of useObservable, but as like another creating another reusable component, which is like useCounter, and we would basically wrap the whole creation of source and
yeah, absolutely. Like if you wanted to, I mean, technically, what you're asking is I could just, this is my use counter or my counter component, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I have some function app that returns counter component. Like, I mean, realistically, that's because that's all that's in here. That's kind of what we did.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, totally. You can wrap this whole thing in a component. If you wanted to have like a hook that did all of this stuff, and maybe that was more your question, is like, yeah, absolutely. You could take this whole thing out and be like, function use counter, put all that stuff in there, and then you need to take the count and return it. I guess I could just return it straight and say, oh, we also have error message. So maybe I don't want to do that. So count. In this case, you'd have count and error message. Myself. So here, count error message equals use counter. So we still have the same thing. This is totally valid. I guess it kind of cleans up this component. This is really up to the person, in my opinion. Like I don't like a lot of indirection in my code. And what I find can happen with stuff like this is people will take this hook and then move it to some other file somewhere far away from the only place that it's used, which is right here. Where if you take this out and you inline it right in the counter component, it's fairly obvious. Like, okay, so the counter component, every single time it renders, it does these things. That's just my own personal preference. Is I don't like. I'm not a big fan of single-use hooks that basically account for the body of what a component's doing. Like I'd almost rather have them there. Now, sometimes you get into a component where like everything above this up here is like this mega function with like hundreds of lines of code. Absolutely break that into hooks. Like that's organizationally, yeah. But if it's just, this isn't a whole lot of stuff, I would probably just keep it in line.
Yeah, because I'm just asking because the example I've shown before was like additionally to fetching some like basic level of data, then it was like fetching additional data on top of that. So it was like turning it from like one fetch request into like 11 fetch requests because it was fetching first 10 repositories, and then for each of those was fetching some additional data.
All right, let's go look at your stuff for a bit, because this is kind of my spiel on, what I would do with RxJS. I mean, there's other things like, maybe you want to get a subject or something, or you want to get like you want to have like some, like a callback that is used in a button to like feed into a subject. Like I think people that are coming from Angular in particular want to try to do that. Or like have an observable of button clicks or something like that. That would be like another sort of thing like this, where maybe you're like function, and I'll just show that really quick, like use subject or whatever. There's probably better things to put in there. And like you would effectively, this is a little trickier because what you want to return is an observable. Let's see, I'll call it like use reactive callback or something. And what you want to get is an observable where a function feeds into whatever that is. And so, like, how do I? What's the best way to go about talking about this? Like, this is something where it's not going to change over time. So really, you're going to have like some, let's see, ref equals use ref null as any, because I'm lazy and I don't want to type this. But this here, you're going to end up kind of returning what's in it. Let's see, current. And I'm going to go ahead and say that if reactive, if we don't have anything in it, what we want to do is create something in it. And inside of that, we're going to have an observable. Actually, I'm going to and some callback. You need to make both of these things. This one's obviously an observable, and this one's obviously some callback. And you can say, all right, so let callback equal. It's going to be like takes a value and does void. And our observable is going to be observable equals new observable subscriber. And callback really isn't going to do anything but something that takes a value t and then calls subscriber value. Super boring. You can't really, is this complaining? Why is this complaining? It's using before it's assigned. Yeah, it's not really, but okay. Well, it kind of is. It's
because
not.
You are
every single
as const. Maybe that's.
Yeah, this isn't going to work. All right. Getting ahead of myself. Sometimes I try to avoid subjects if I can, because they're a heavier type than an observable. But like, yeah, this will do. So we can just change this callback.
Also, just calling out, we have only 15 minutes left.
There's that, and then observable here is just going to be subject as observable. And like I could just create a reference to the subject and send it out, but like I don't like doing that because people will call unsubscribe on it, or they'll pass it around as an observable. And really what they wanted was the callback and the observable. They didn't want any of that other stuff. So I just go here, and like now you've got something where you can go into your component, wherever that may be. Let's just say it's here. And, you know, if you have a button, you can say, you know, clicked or whatever. And you can get your, what did I call this? Use reactive callback. Callback clicks equals use reactive callback. And this is now something where you can use it. So every time I click this button, it's going to feed into clicks. And then of course you can use this in conjunction with useSubscription, where you would say, okay, close this a little bit. Still need to do our use memo. You know, and just whatever you're going to do with this. Why is this upset? This is upset because I'm not passing anything in. And upset about that. All right. So there's our source, and we say our source goes here. And maybe I do use observable for this one as well. So we've got like a thing where now I've got like this is reacting to it. I mean, this is all, I don't know. It's super, like there are libraries out there. I think there's one called like Observable Hooks that, yeah, I have it up here in a tab that attempts to do very similar things. This is like a more all encompassing like solution for everybody, like Swiss Army knife sort of thing. But I mean, as you can see, like this is just a few lines of code. Like this is not super advanced stuff. I think people try to engineer ahead of themselves sometimes. Like this use reactive callback thing is generally enough to get you what you need. It's not a lot of code. You know, you can change it later if you need be. I personally like smaller composable bits to my code because it makes my code more flexible, but that's me. So I'm going to stop sharing really quick so we can go back and look at your example.
Actually, I've sent a link. Maybe you can just open it and.
Okay, let's. There's everybody there. All right. 404.
We only have 10 minutes.
Okay.
I think it's because I added you, Ben, and you need to accept the invitation to the repo.
Right on.
Okay, then I can maybe share.
Sounds good.
Share screen.
And sorry, I rambled there for a bit. I didn't want to like take away from whatever Chris is doing. I just wanted to get across the general patterns that I use in React when I'm using RxJS, and the general patterns as I see them out there. And I think that most things you're going to find with RxJS are exactly what I had in there. It's just usually they're doing more than I generally try to do.
Tracy, could you share my?
Yes. There we go.
Awesome. So my takeaway from it is that maybe it would be better to like use some of those helpers that you've created to split this logic into like more reusable things. But because there is so much, well, maybe not so much, we already exported some of the functionality into like this merge repositories with branch count, which is doing, can I navigate? Yep. Which is doing some additional logic on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's not as convoluted on the top layer, but yeah, this use subscription seems like a good way to like maybe clean this up a bit and not have to deal with subscribing in here and unsubscribing. So that might be a nice approach.
Yeah. So totally. One other thing I'll call out about what I'm seeing in here is that there's this, and I've seen this pattern before, is using tap and then subscribing like an empty subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular case, this is actually causing more work to be executed than necessary, because what you're doing is you're creating a subscription in tap, and then that's creating another subscription to whatever came from SwitchMap, right? So the pattern of subscribing in tap is only useful if you happen to have an error handler downstream. So let's just say that set state errors, which we know it can't, because set state isn't something that can really error. But if you were to have like a whatever that set state is, and instead of being a set state from React hooks, it was something that could possibly error, then you can have that handler in there, and then like handle the error downstream in your subscribe. But in this case, we're not. Yeah, in this case, we're not really doing that. So you could basically just move that set state down to subscribe and eliminate the tap, and it'll perform a little better because you're not going through an additional set of function calls to propagate that value.
I think this pattern comes from like my Angular experience when I like do a lot of like rather async pipes, where the subscription is happening behind the scenes.
You're right. Absolutely right. Yeah. So if you wanted any kind of side effect of like update something else in Angular, but you're using async pipe to subscribe to everything, yeah, you would have to use tap in that case.
Yeah, but maybe that's something that like doesn't translate to React as straightforward. And this like if we use subscription, you would just pass it as the next handler, right?
Well, I'm sorry, what for the
if we were using your useSubscription helper hook, we would just pass it as a next handler.
That's exactly right. And in this case, given the pattern that you're doing here, this whole thing would probably just use like a useObservable, right? So it would use that next composable bit up, because all you're really doing is subscribing to it, getting the piece of state out and emitting it. So you would probably reuse that in this particular case.
Yeah. And like my question originated from like, this is great if this is like a single component, a single use hook. But if we wanted to share state and like hoist this state to, I don't know, some like global or semi-global place, we would need to like abstract it away a bit more to not do props drilling later on.
All right. Well, actually, this example that you have right here is a really good example. So whenever you're creating your observable, you see you don't really have any you don't have any arguments to use top repos, right? There's nothing that's going to change when you create that observable. So you could literally take the observable that you're creating in there with from fetch with auth all the way down to subscribe. You could copy and paste that out into its own global variable, because observables are just functions. So you can have that at the module level, call it whatever you like, and then use that inside of your use top repos, because that's not ever going to change. You don't need to recreate that every single time the effect comes around. Now, in that case, that thing, that observable that is dealing with your state is a global level thing. So if you had an observable out there, right, that had some shared state, like maybe you put a share on it or something like that, then absolutely now what you've done is you've taken all of the state or the management around the state for that fetch or whatever it is, and you've moved it out of React completely. And what you're going to do is probably use your useObservable or useSubscription hooks inside of your React component to get that state out. And clearly you could do this, like you could take a behavior subject, right? Which would be a really common thing. So if you look at, Facebook has a thing called recoil. I'm sure that you might have heard of solid.js by now. There's a number of these sorts of things that exist. I think Vue even has a primitive that's very similar. But basically, atoms in recoil and various other things that exist out there are basically behavior subjects. And behavior subjects come from the idea of a behavior in functional React programming, blah. It boils down to a behavior subject is a value that changes over time, and you can examine it by saying, give me the value, or you can subscribe to the changes over time. And you can set values on it, right? So that's what a behavior subject is. I wish it had a better name, but it is what it is because it's been named that for like a decade now. So you can, outside at a global level, put a behavior subject out there. You don't ever really want to complete it or error on it, but where you can call next on it to set values. And then everyone else that subscribes to that behavior subject with useObservable or whatever is going to get updates from that behavior subject. And now you've got this piece of state. So as soon as anything comes up, it says, hey, what's in that behavior subject? Because the behavior subject is going to synchronously push a value at it, and it's going to update the view. And anytime someone updates that behavior subject, it's going to update the view. And so now you've got this atom, this behavior out there, this value that changes over time that you can update from anywhere by just getting a reference to it and calling next on it. Or you can get the value from it by using useObservable or whatever to subscribe to it. And that's a pattern that works everywhere. You can use that in Angular. You can use it all over the place. I'm actually surprised I don't see that more often. I think people reach for like the Redux style thing more often, where they're like, I'm going to use a scan and I'm going to have this dispatcher that does this thing. And like, that's a great pattern too. I feel like the behavior subjects may be a little simpler, but that's another, like if you're talking about managing the state of a value, like managing a value external to your components in a global way, behavior subjects are a great thing because they're very simple. And it's like, here's a single value and I explicitly update it. And I, push the value, the updates to everybody else when I do so.
So we are basically out of time, which I feel like we could probably go on for a little bit longer, but anything we want to kind of like summarize, wrap up, and this is a part of a series. So Ben, Jay, I'll take the flag from here.
Wait.
It is perfect, Ben. Right. It is perfect.
That's going to be on my desk looking at me all day too. I want you to know. Like, basically a severed whale head looking at me.
So what is our conclusion? Like, Chris, do you want to wrap things up, or Ben, do you want to say anything? To kind of wrap things up?
For my part, I would say, if you're doing anything, just anything in general, not even RxJS related, but anything in general, you want to try to have like small composable pieces to build things. Observables are just functions. You can take them and create them outside of your components, especially if there's no arguments to creating it, then you absolutely should be doing that probably anyways. And the whole behavior subject thing, which unfortunately we didn't spend a lot of time on, is an important bit as well. Like people need to know, I've got a value that changed over time and I want to push updates to everybody. Create a behavior subject somewhere and pass it around. Like that solves a good amount of those problems. If you're already using RxJS, you don't need to start using recoil in order to have that sort of thing alongside of RxJS. Like literally I recreated recoil, I think with like 20 lines of RxJS or something like that not too long ago. So it's a thing that's relatively easy, and it was all because behavior subject is what it happens.
Yeah, like I definitely maybe try to over engineer that problem, and that I think that is something that a lot of people that work with RxJS and get too excited about it are doing.
I don't think you over-engineered it at all. Like honestly, like I wouldn't look at that and be like, oh God, I have to change all this stuff. This is horrifying. Like no, it was 100% what I would expect to see in most apps. The only bit that I would say that might be useful is the idea of having like some smaller composable hooks to reuse inside of various things.
Yeah, cool. that was very useful, and we will try to basically simplify it like that, and that should do it.
Cool. Well, y'all stay tuned for the next episode in this series, and thanks so much, Ben, for joining us today. We had a lot of fun, and we'll see you in just a bit.